I think I was always an artist in that, like, from my earliest childhood memories was drawing with my mother before I went to school, and kind of school interrupted the whole process of me being an artist. I had to learn to be in a school environment as a small child, which was a bit of a struggle. But then as time moved on, I found a great school. We moved quite a bit and ended up in Aircourt in County Galway from my teenage years, early teens, and went to a girls' boarding school called the LSU, where I met my art teacher there was Sheila Hock. From there on, my path was kind of clearly carved out. I kind of knew I was going to go to art college then, so went to NCAD. I kind of continued my artistic explorations directly there after. I think in 1986, I started working for Hot Press magazine, doing illustrations that were very political in nature. It was a very fraught time in Ireland then. It was like, there was a lot, like the Troubles were still going on in the north. There was a lot of, the various referenda were about to take place and taking place. So it was a big struggle between a growing liberal version of Ireland versus a very conservative and church-dominated world. So I grew up in an environment that was, where art wasn't that, it certainly wasn't common. And music was sort of the sign from the outside world that there was another way of seeing the world and thinking. And I mean, back when I was still in school, there was even access to radio was compromised. There was only one radio station that only played a little bit of music. So I was listening as a child, like in my early teens, I was listening to Radio Luxembourg. And that was on a long wave radio that my Aunt Molly sent from America. And I could get it when the weather was right. And I would listen with a single earphone. And depending on the atmospheric conditions, it was clear or unclear. And so that shifted from, in 1977, Hot Press came out. And that was, Hot Press was an Irish music magazine with politics interwoven into it. And so 77, I was still in school, but I kind of knew that was where I would find a home. So 77, so it was 9 years before it actually happened. But that was really important. That was a huge part of my education, was being in that environment in Hot Press. As you know, I was still only in my early 20s. Channel a lot of my frustration with the Ireland that I'd grown up in. You know, it was obviously wonderful parts to it, but that single kind of dominating influence was there, and you felt you had to kind of challenge that. And Hot Press was the perfect place to do it. And from that, the Irish Times started seeing what I was doing in Hot Press, so I started working for the Irish Times. Again, doing illustrations about, you know, very tough issues about women travelling for abortions in the UK, about the divorce referenda, about, you know, a lot of stuff that had been swept under the carpet. And Hot Press were fearless in dealing with these issues, and the Irish Times also then subsequently. And so then for about 10, 15 years, I worked for various newspapers. So music is a big part of this story because, like Hot Press being a music magazine, I was always very passionate about music. It was a connection to the outside world. I suppose that's the thing about it, that you just felt that there's other people out there that feel the same way as you do, you know. I had notions. I would have, in the same school, in that girls' boarding school with just a few boys, there was a big emphasis on music and art, which was fantastic for me, because so we did a lot of drama, a lot of music. I learned to play the guitar there. When I finished in art college, I had a notion that I might perform solo, and I did a couple of gigs, support gigs, but I was so nervous. It was just terrifying. And I was doing covers, and it was so alarming that I reached a point with it that I probably did 6 or 7 gigs, one for Declan Sinnott, who plays with Christy Moore in subsequent years. It was just absolutely terrifying. And I kind of lost confidence in the whole thing, really. I'd still play in pubs, you know, when I was down the country, when I'd visit. But until we moved here to Wicklow, And I found some like-minded people who had also played before and had given it up. The pub, like the local pub, grew into a kind of a band. The guys I knew there, and we played country covers in a very kind of a wild drinking band that was just great fun and had the great freedom about it. And that was called the Whippoorwills. I had the opportunity to meet people who were very good at what they're doing musically. So Glen Hansard, I met him, and I had the opportunity to hear him play songs that weren't fully formed yet. And that was on his kitchen table. And I remember that night coming back, or the next day maybe coming back, thinking, wow, I think I can do this. I know where to go to write music or write songs, because I'd never seen or heard a song that wasn't finished before. So I recognized it was like a pencil drawing for a song. I literally came back the next day and I realized the same well that I get my artwork from could contain music. I could find a voice there. But it took a long time to figure out how to connect those two things, because with the artwork, when I drop the bucket, what I pull up is very consistent. It's consistently dark, but it has a certain aesthetic to it that I don't have to think about too much. Whereas with the music, we've used the same idea. I drop the bucket and a different genre of music almost would come up every time. And not necessarily something I could play, but it would be, I might have a Latin feel one day, it might have a jazzy feel, it might have a country feel. And I would then try and write a song around that style, but it didn't make a lot of sense. It was fun to do, but it didn't seem connected to the artwork. I made the first album with Declan O'Rourke producing, and it was an incredible experience and a hugely exciting thing to record for the first time in a studio with a live band, and I'm very pleased with the results. I really wanted to try to blend the two things together, and I didn't know how. I did a gig with the piano player from the band, Jay Wilson, and fortunately for me, Torsten Kinsler of God as an Astronaut came along. And he had an idea that I think I can help you connect the two things. He said, you're well able to write songs and all, but there's something, I don't see the connection between your art and the music you're making at the moment. We started our process that's taken about 3 years, and it's been a very fruitful relationship because we've managed to, I'm doing artwork for their album covers, and so Torsten produces, and he's like a film director to my film, because and it's the consistency of what he says is what's really important. So no longer does the bucket drop down and pick up a random piece of music that I just feel that I like to explore. So the Echotal project is about making a consistent body of work, very slowly, very incrementally, but in a style that fits the music. So I can still, as David Rooney, drop the bucket down and in another, wearing a different hat, I might do a country album next. I don't know, but at least the Echotal thing is tailored to reflect the artwork. I've learned so much in the process of making music that I haven't learned through the art, because the art is made by, like, the 5-year-old who didn't want to go to school is the guy who draws the pictures. There's a cave that I work in, kind of an emotional cave, that I just have to switch everything off, and like the light is fading here and we'll wick a little bit now, and this is my perfect time to get started with engraving. And I can get completely lost in the process. And the best of it comes from me being absent. If I let it happen, it'll be good. If I think about it too much, it won't. So I have to literally keep filtering myself out of it. And the results usually, because I've gotten better and better over 3 decades of doing it, of apart from occasionally, I'll still kind of mess things up by overthinking it. Like if a really great project comes up, and if I'm like, oh, I really want to do a really great job on this, that's a really bad idea, because that's going to influence what I do. And if I wake up with the idea, they're the best ideas. And I do that quite often. So, and I think increasingly now the ideas are very dream influenced. Even if they're not directly connected to a dream, they feel like they're dreams. Like I've had huge freedom with the Gods and Astronaut stuff. I mean, the recent Ghost Tapes #10 is directly from a dream. I mean, it's a recurring dream where there's a specific plane. It's a Boeing 737, and it's disintegrating right above my head. I wake up and the nose cone of the plane is right in front of my face. And I open my eyes and I can see the plane extending above me. And I know it's crashing, but it's not actually going to reach me. And it's only stopped a meter above me, but it's coming apart, sort of from the tail up. They're wonderful moments when something where you really don't have any part in it other than to be to let it unfold. I think film is the big influence for me. I think everything I do could be lit and filmed. That's why I love the process of the videos associated with Echo Hotel, because I'm making sound effects in my head and sometimes not in my head. It's very real for me, but it is like a still from a movie. The movie is a black and white movie usually in my head, and it's those early films I would have seen, probably watching with my mother. My dad was in the Guard, so he'd be working often late at night, and I'd keep her company, which meant staying up late watching old movies, which I adored. And particularly, even when I was too young to obviously understand what it was I was looking at, but it was always film noir. That was what was really, that I really connected with, Also the album cover for Joe Quayle, it happened in a very, very similar way, a conversation with her. She's a wonderful cellist and composer based in London. She asked me to do an album cover. And before I'd heard the piece of work called The Cartographer, I had a conversation with her about my love of seabirds. And as a child, when I really, really hated going to school, there's a point when I was about 10, 1970, we were living in Middleton near a sea estuary. I'd get back from school and the first thing I would do is, run down to the estuary with my binoculars. And there's a book, a bird guide book that I still have. And I go down there with my binoculars. I was like a 10-year-old kid. And the birds were my savior. They were my sanctuary. The birds, the migrating birds coming and going. And I found a dead cormorant one day. And it had a ring on its leg. And the ring had information where to send it to. So it was in London. I posted it off. I got a letter back saying, "Thank you, David Rooney. This is the history of the cormorant." It was the best thing ever happened to me. It was like extraordinary. It was like, again, it was the outside world. Kind of, the bird had connected me to beyond where I was, certainly very unhappy in the school. And so the birds seabirds still have this, their wanderings and going and comings have just have a real magic for me. So the conversation with Joe Quayle, I told her that story and she said, "You should make the cover about that." Let's see, with those two album covers in mind, I got a call from Christy Moore, which is like, Christy Moore is a legend here in Ireland. I would have spent my teenage years going to see him. My interest in folk music would have been hugely coloured by his involvement with Planxty and Moving Hearts. So I got a phone call from him asking me would I do an album cover. And again, that was one of those moments where you think, oh, I really can't screw this up. This is really, really important. My father would be a huge fan of Christy Moore's as well, and I think, God, I really got to get this right. So I spent a lot of time going back and forth on the phone and emailing him ideas. I was trying to do something good. and trying to do what I thought he would like. So he came out to the studio. I had no visitors here in the studio all during the COVID, and so the only person who was to visit was Christy Moore, which is like having Batman come to visit. It was just extraordinary, like superhero comes into your studio. And we had a chat about it, and he saw Joe Quayle's cover on the computer screen, and he went, I'll just go off and do what you want to do. I mean, just look at that. That's literally what happened. And the cover for him was like quite a dreamlike thing again, which did connect with the music, but he again just gave me the freedom. So the reason Christy found me in the first place was someone made him aware of my 1916 Portraits and Lives illustrations, which was a book published by the Royal Irish Academy as part of the centenary celebrations of the 1916 Rising. There's also an exhibition in Kilmainham Jail, and this is all supported by the OPW, who also organised a tour through the Department of Foreign Affairs of prints of the show that went around the world. So, like, I wasn't known for portrait work, so it was a steep learning curve and a big challenge and a huge honour. It really was. Luckily, I had illustrated Plutarch's Lives for the Folio Society some years earlier, and that gave me a feeling for portrait work. And so, like all these projects, they're so enriching. I learned so much. You know, it's incredible.
What the Iceman saw, no man had seen before. What the Iceman saw, no man.
If you work with people who give you that gift of allowing you to express something that's deep within you, and then it communicates with people. You know, I suppose the thing about illustration that I always kind of cherish is the fact that it isn't in a gallery. You know, it's not going to be bought. It's not on someone's wall. Like that's not the focal point of it. It's serving a purpose. It is connecting with somebody. You know, it's making visual something that, and particularly with music, it's to make that connection with an artist that you'd have huge respect for, and for that visual element to be part of the project is like a real gift, you know. My technique is scraper board, so I'm scraping away to reveal. It's a chalk covered board covered with black ink, and I'm scraping away to reveal white. Kitty's an important part of the team here. Sometimes I get Kitty to do if I need 4 parallel lines, she's very good at that. Clears away huge swathes of it, no problem. So that scratching process is very important for me because it's an uncovering. Editorial work with the Irish Times came to an end in the crash of 2008. Fortunately for me, I got a phone call from Mike Connolly in London and from the BBC. And Mike originally comes from Ireland and big into music, would have worked in the music department of the BBC, and including Jules Holland show. And he was at a meeting in London talking about this series that they were producing, a 5-part documentary series called The Story of Ireland. And at the meeting, he said, there's this guy in Ireland does this scratchy thing. I've seen him in hot press. And maybe he'd be good to, because they'd run out of time to do on location pieces. And so he phoned me from the meeting, and I was miraculously, and thank God I was here, because I picked up the phone. He said, is that David Rooney, the guy who does the scratchy stuff in hot press? And I went, yeah. He said, we need 100 illustrations for a series. Can you do them, in that style? And it's the story of Ireland, history related. And I'd never done history related stuff before. But I had a feeling that it would work. But, I'm also, once I heard BBC and 100 illustrations, I was going to say yes, no matter how I was going to figure it out afterwards. So I did it in 3 months. So that's one every day. That's the pencil idea approved at night and the scraper board the following morning. So every 24 hours was one done. And it was during the big snow that was here. So the place was completely, we were snowed in. But during that process, as 100 illustrations, but there was 10 of them related to the famine. When it came to the famine, something clicked with me. I just felt an emotional connection with it. And of course, it's not surprising because I'm originally from the west of Ireland. My mother's family from Tuam. My mother would remember. I remembered old people from Connemara coming in when she was a small child that still carried with them the echoes of the famine. You know, so it's funny. I didn't consider how important this was to me until I was doing those drawings, and it was right in the middle of the snow. And they just literally came out of nowhere. They were real people. I was able to summon them from the past. I knew who they were. I've always been very attached to those pieces. You know, they're probably my favorite 10 illustrations I've ever done. But I didn't know what, unless someone saw them in the documentary and subsequent versions of it. You can see it on YouTube, but unless people went to find it, there was no place to see them. And I heard an interview with David Broderick from the Portumna workhouse, the workhouse centre, and he was talking about there was like 167 workhouses built around Ireland to look after the destitute people, but it was a horrendous decision to make. You went in there, families were separated. You were given basic food and menial work, including teasing rope from the Royal Navy. So breaking rocks. It was just about better than the alternative, which was starving to death, or for the lucky ones getting away and emigrating. So David's interview was really great on the radio, and I got in touch with him and I said, I've got these 10 pieces and I'm really attached to them. I really think that they could find out. Would you be interested to have a look at them? And so they had a look and they offered to find a permanent home for them in the workhouse centre. And so that came to pass, and it was a real honour. This only happened last summer. And Declan O'Rourke, who has written a wonderful book about the famine and produced wonderful music about it, his book called The Pawnbroker's Reward. He came along, did a great opening speech, and I was very moved by the whole occasion. And I came back here and I picked up this guitar right here, and this tune just came out of nowhere. It seemed to be in the same way as the portraits had come out, as those figures from the famine. And I guess it's the first time that I kind of felt that what I'd been trying to achieve with the music had just there and then happened. I didn't think about music. It seemed to just come in the same way as the artwork did. And so I brought the idea to Torsten. We recorded it, and Joe Quayle, who I mentioned earlier on with the cellist, I sent it to her and she added her magical cellos to it, because it's a mixture of acoustic cello and electric cello with effects. And so then I was able to revisit the illustrations and animate them with Simona Heineck over, and she edited it all together. It's a hugely collaborative in the way that the art isn't. I need someone to, that direction that I get from Torsten, And also like the guitar on its own, it's fine, but like when the cellos are added to it, it's just such an emotional thing. It's like, I guess that's the magic of it's a much more personal journey when the music is infused with the art for me, you know.